Everybody, my name is Michael from Polygon Island, and today I'm going to be going over a few things that can help you become a better artist. Now, some of you might not know, I am, and I do art. That's what I do. Um, and I have an Instagram where I post all my art. So, a lot of you, if you just follow this channel, and this channel specifically, don't know I have an Instagram and probably don't know that I do art regularly. But my Instagram will be on the screen and linked in the description below if you guys want to go check out some of my art. It'll be really appreciated if you do. But there are some key things that I do and a lot of other artists do that make stuff stand out. And what I mean by that is to not just make your stuff look like another render or another thing made in a 3D program, or just something that you just, it doesn't really pop. Now, my first thing that you need to know when making art, if you do art regularly, and you actually make art, this doesn't necessarily apply to people who just like make scenes and all different types of scenes, and it's just like someone who does that type of stuff. But if you're an actual artist and want to make digital art in Blender or pretty much any program, this doesn't just apply to Blender. This is just basic guidelines for making 3D art in general. So if you're using another program like Maya or C4D, this will apply to you too. So the first and most important thing of being an actual artist is having an art style. There are so many like really talented artists that I see that just don't have a style, and they make really cool stuff, but they just never really know where they're going with it. They have the texturing down, they have the modeling down, but they never really know what to do with all of that stuff. And they're making different renders, they're making all sorts of different things, but they never really have any motivation of what to do, and it winds up not looking as good as it should. So, how do you find an art style? Well, finding an art style is really hard. And it can't be explained by somebody else. An art style is how you express yourself in art. It's what your art looks like and what your art looks like to other people. It's the style. It's the style of your entire like set of art. It's what you do. So having an art style is very important, because not only does it kind of structure your art in a way that somebody who sees it knows that it's from you, but it also structures it to where you can have motivation, and it's easier to find motivation within that art style to make more stuff, because art is hard. I think everybody knows that. No matter what kind of art you do, whether it's traditional 2D, digital 2D, digital 3D, or traditional 3D art, you're gonna get an artist block one way or another. Doesn't matter if you have an art style or not. There's gonna be times where you have absolutely no clue what to do, but having an art style just kind of helps as kind of a starting point, and you know what your art looks like, you know how it should look like, and if it doesn't look how it should, if it doesn't look like your art, then you can take steps to fix that. So what my art focus around mainly is human emotion, and it can be very abstract in a lot of ways. Every single one of my art pieces on my Instagram have a meaning to me. It may not be the same meaning to everybody else, but everything that I make has a meaning behind it of why I made it, or why I chose to do what I did with the scene. Now, my art focuses basically around this guy, and this guy is what I use. He's obviously a human, and that's what I depict as human emotion. But there are a lot of other stuff in my art that I use as symbolism to kind of add on to that, because if I just slap this guy into any scene, it would kind of look kind of boring. But in a lot of my scenes and a lot of my pieces, you'll see a lot of symbolism, mostly about angels or angel-like things, and that's to symbolize that even the purest of beings are either broken or damaged or not perfect in some way, and that's okay. Not everybody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Everybody has their flaws. Everybody has things that can be considered wrong with them, but that's okay. That is what makes us human, and that's what my art focuses around. And beyond the symbolism part of an art style, it's the actual look of your scenes. Even though you may have the same symbolism of scenes, if you can have like completely different lighting, you can have completely different composition, and that's not necessarily bad. That is perfectly okay, but you just know how to do it right. And if you look at your art and you can say, this doesn't look like me, then you should probably change something. And you need to make your art look like you. You need to make your art look like it's what you're expressing, and it's what you created, and it's what you feel. Art at its core is all about emotion, and that's what I love about it. You can express art and emotion in any way, no matter what kind of art form you're using, whether it's like music or just general like picture art in general. It's just, you can express that in any way, and an art style is how you express it. So the most important things about being an artist is finding an art style that suits you and that you like and that you can just continue on doing. Other things that are slightly less important but still very important is, if you have an art style but your art still isn't looking good, or your art still isn't like getting anywhere, or like nobody really likes it necessarily, you need to stop and think about a few things. One is composition. What does your scene look like? What catches your eye? What's the first thing that you want people to notice from your scene? I see so many artists that are like amazing with modeling, texturing, and just everything, but they have these renders that you have nothing to focus on, and it might look good, but it's just boring. You have nothing to focus on. Your eye doesn't catch anything saying, oh, that looks cool, I wonder what that means, or that looks cool, I wonder how you made that. If you can make a bare field and it could look like the most realistic and amazing field that anybody's ever made on this earth, but in the end it's a field. What are you gonna look at in a field? The grass might look good, but it's just grass. Somebody's gonna look at the grass, say, oh, that's some good grass, and then scroll on. You need to have a focal point in every single image that you make. A focal point will capture somebody's attention and will keep them, and will make them look at the art a little bit more. Along with the focal point, you need to have smaller focal points guided by the main focal point. So great examples of this is lines, and I'm not talking about just straight lines. I'm talking about like fences, anything that can guide somebody toward something. For example, in this here, we have the center sphere. I'm not going to show the render yet, but we have the center sphere, and we have these lines going out to guide the viewer toward the edge of the image, and then we have these wires going to the main focal point of the image. Now the main focal point of this image is obviously the human, and then the background focal point of this image is this. And so if we look at the render, we can see that the main focal point is the human, and it's guided up to this. So you're going to look at the human, or you might look at the background first, but either way, you're going to be guided by these lines. You might not know it, but subconsciously, your mind wants to have something to follow. In every image that you look, your mind wants to have something to follow. Everywhere you look, your mind wants to have somewhere to follow, to look for something else. And so adding multiple focal points into your image will have people looking around more in your image, and will have people noticing more things that they may not have noticed if there's nothing guiding them. So that's very important too. Other things is just making your image look good. Now, this is very hard for beginners, obviously, because beginners that have never done art before, they don't really know art principles. They don't really know how to make stuff look good. They don't know about color theory. They don't know what colors go with which. But if you don't know that, and if you don't know how to make your renders look good, I would highly recommend looking up some like tutorials on color theory, or some tutorials on like composition in general and colors, and just finding color palettes and colors that go good with each other. And if you can't find it, just look at a color wheel. Look at what colors are going with each other. Like, for example, blue and orange, or blue and orange. I don't know, but just look at a color wheel. Find what color is. Just find what color. For example, we have like blue and red, or yellow and blue, purple and green, purple and cyan. All these colors that like go with each other, and it just makes your image look a lot nicer and just better in general. You also don't want to have one thing completely outblown in the image and then everything else just kind of there. You want to have all your focal elements. If you want something to be focused on, you can't have something else be completely taking away attention from the image. So, for example, if I wanted this guy to be the main focal point, I can't just have him dark. Like, there has to be light on him. There has to be something symbolizing that I want you to look at this guy. So, for example, if I go into render view right here, we can see that he's lit up by this halo. Now, if I take away this, not that one, if I take away this halo, we can see that the image is just lighting up the back of him, and he's just dark. You can see nothing on him except like the outline of his body and a little bit down here, but that halo lights up his face, lights up his chest. It makes it seem like I want you to look at him, which I do. That's what I want in this art piece. So you need to make sure that people can focus on your images. Another thing that you don't have to do but will add a lot to your image is post-processing. Now, post-processing can be done in many forms, whether it's an outside program like Photoshop or just in the compositing in Blender. Now, usually in Blender, what I do is all I do in the compositing in Blender is just add a glare node to just kind of give it a little bit of a glow, and you can change the intensity of the glow. That's just basically what I do in the compositor. Everything else I do in Photoshop. Now, what I do in Photoshop is I add different stuff. So you can see this looks a lot different than this because it has compositing stuff. So if I just go ahead and disable or change the visibility on all these, what we can do is we can see what they all do. So the exposure doesn't really do a lot, but it makes it a little bit brighter. Then I have a brightness and contrast, which makes the scene itself brighter. I have a color curves, which kind of tames that brightness and exposure. Then I have a hue saturation, which I brought down the saturation, which is what I do in a lot of my renders because I don't like the colors popping a lot. I still want the colors. I'm not going to turn the saturation all the way down, but I still want the colors in there. But I want this to kind of have a moody feel, so I don't want the colors to be all like bright and sunshiny. I want them to have a kind of not monotone, but just a cooler or like more down to earth. I don't know how to describe it. Just less saturated, okay? And then what I do after that is I add dust to my images. You can just go on Google, download like dust overlays if you have to, and then just put them in a Photoshop and then change the blend mode to lighten and then change the opacity. Dust, film grain, scratches adds a ton to your image. It adds a lot. It adds more depth. It looks like there's a lot more in the atmosphere. I then added curves to that to kind of tame it down a little bit so it's not as in your face. And then I added another dust, which this one's kind of more like a scratchy dust, and then I then add a curves to that too. And also on this layer I have a tilt shift blur, which is just here, and then it just kind of blurs different parts of the images, which I like. So compositing is also a big thing. You don't have to do a lot of compositing or post-processing, but really recommend doing at least something to your image, because it adds a lot. It really does. So that is just these are just my tips to kind of help you become a better artist, or just tips to try to get your renders looking a little bit better. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you can take something and use it in your next render. And if you did, leave it in the comments below. I love reading you guys' comments. I read every single one of them. But thanks guys so much for watching. My name is Michael from Polygon Island, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.